Let's see, going live, doing some Angel Dragon crafting, Angel Dragon suit crafting, I should say. And I think we lost the connection. Okay, looks like we're back. Okay, back again. So I have extended the length of this Angel Dragon. This is going to become my outer layer, and I actually cut it in half at the belly, and I added 4-inch to make the torso 4-inch longer. So that's added all the way around. And then I added these sections that flare out to about 4 inches on either side. I basically separated the factory seam, and then I created a template in the previous video, and that became the additional material added to the left and right of the belly. So the belly is actually now kind of a big oval rather than this little hourglass shape. I could have kept the hourglass shape had I added blue on the left and right, but I decided to try something different on this one and make the white area a little bit larger. So now some of this extra material has been added to the front, but I'm going to also add some of this extra material to the back. And so I have created another template, and the way that I did this was by putting this on actually with the back cut open and with the two seams on the front opened up. I put it on, and then I had my wife measure me and figure out, standing up straight, where did the extra material need to go? How much of a gap did I have? And we took measurements at the hips and the waist and the underbust and the chest, and then kind of the shoulders and then the neck. And once we had those measurements, both on the front, on each side on the front, and then on the back, we took all these measurements. And that way, it was fairly easy to basically come in here. I stuffed this with blankets and created pieces of tape that had the markings already on there, like 8 inches and 12 inches and 5 inches and so forth. And I put them at these different points measured from the crotch up. So I knew where the hips, the waist, the underbust, the chest, and then of course the neck. And then stuffed it, and then kind of measured it out, and then stuck a piece of clear plastic. This is actually from a huge Ziploc bag, and then traced out what I needed, and actually kind of folded it in half and tweaked it a little bit to make it symmetrical, because where I had done the marker wasn't exactly symmetrical. But I basically, if I had slightly two different lines, once I folded it in half, I kind of drew a line about midway through it, and that's kind of where I ended up using. But actually, when I laid this down, this is exactly how much material I want. What I ended up doing, well, thank you. I comment that I'm really good with my craftsmanship. I try. I'm always learning new things, though. Once I laid this down, then I actually cut it about a 1/2 inch larger on each side, so that is my seam allowance. I'm going to do about a 1/2 inch overlap. So now that I have this piece cut out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start attaching it. But actually, I think before I do that, I'm going to fix this real quick. So this is where there was a inflation valve on the back of the Angel Dragon, and I need to go ahead and add some material in there because that's actually wider than my seam allowance. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the remnants of the valve. The base of the valve is still kind of attached. So I'm going to open this up that it's just, now it's just flat vinyl. And then do this one. Okay. So now I want to put a little bit of material there, and I should have some all over the place. Let's see. The question is getting the right color, because on this toy, for some reason, I think they must have ran out of one color. The legs actually are a little bit more green. You probably can't really tell from the camera so much, maybe, but this has got a little more green to it. This has a little more like red and blue. It's a little more purpley. You'll notice it if you try to patch with the wrong color. So the legs are kind of one color, and the tail is generally the same color as the legs, although on some of these I've seen where the tail is the same color as the torso. The arms are the same color as the torso. So I'm going to take and attach a little bit of this material here. I'm just going to kind of create about a 1/2 inch bead of glue. Try to make it nice and even. Smooth it out. Rolling it out to get the bubbles out and to get a good bond. I'll keep coming back to this over the next 30 minutes and roll it. And take my cutter and cut that straight. I'm gonna cut some of this excess off here. Let's see. Go ahead and do the same thing to this other side. Using HH66 vinyl cement and a syringe with a blunt needle. You can get these syringes and the blunt needles from Amazon. And I find that the green needle, which is a 18 gauge, works really well for kind of general purpose stuff. You can go bigger or smaller for other things, but kind of just as a good all-around size, the 18 gauge works really well. The key is pressure. There's not really a right way to do it. You can use your thumbs, you can roll it, you can clamp it. Really, I kind of use a variety of those methods. If you find one method works better for you than another, there's not really a right way to do it. If you want to try clamping it, using a wooden paint stir is a great way to distribute the pressure. So you can do a paint stir, and you can even wrap it with painter's tape to make it non-stick. And you can put one of the paint stirrers underneath and put one of the paint stirrers on top, and the material in between, and then actually put several clamps across it, and that works really well. The key, I guess, is just to make sure that you give it good pressure to bond, especially in the first hour. I try to kind of come back and keep putting pressure on every 5 to 10 minutes for the next at least for the next 30 minutes, because you can see even 30 minutes after you put the glue on, you can definitely see the bubbles and the wrinkles spread out. And so it doesn't really completely set up for about an hour. It kind of depends on how much glue you use for how long it takes to completely set up. Okay, so now I am ready to add this panel of material, and then after I add the panel of material, I'll be ready to cut a slit right in the middle, which will become my zipper. So I'm going to go ahead and mount this, and then we'll do the zipper, and then it'll be ready to try on to make sure that all the dimensions and everything fit. This one's for me, so I'll be able to just try it on and make sure that it fits okay. And then once I know that it fits, then I can, if it doesn't, I can make tweaks to the design. But if it fits, then I can go ahead and do the same thing to the inside layer. And on the inside layer, at least I have the flexibility that I don't necessarily have to match the color. If I don't want to, I could use other colors because you won't really see it. It's on the inside. So the outside I try to make look real nice, and then the inside I can get away with a little more. So I am ready. If I can find what I did with my piece. I seem to have tossed it aside on my incredibly messy desk that just always seems to stay messy. I clean it, but it always ends up pretty messy because there's always a lot going on here. So let's see. I must have tossed it on the floor here. Aha. Uh-oh. Looks like when I was checking my... There it is. When I was checking my my pattern, one thing you got to be a little careful with is sometimes that Sharpie, if you use a Sharpie, can transfer over to the vinyl. And the problem with Sharpie is it does not want to come off real easy. I'm using isopropyl alcohol here. And it partially comes off, but it's just this area down here. It partially comes off with the alcohol, but it really takes a little bit of acetone on a Q-tip to completely come off. So, and you want to catch this soon, because if you let it go for too long, then you won't get it out. So luckily this just went on probably 5 or 10 minutes ago. So it hasn't really gone into the material. Silver Sharpie actually works pretty good at coming off. It's a very different type of an ink than the black Sharpie. So I oftentimes will use Silver Sharpie for making marks. The black Sharpie is nice for writing on the clear plastic for templates, but you do have to be really careful because it can come back off. Alright, looks like I've cleaned that off all pretty good. I just wanted to catch it before it really seeped into the material and became permanent. All right, so this is up towards the neck right here, and then this is down towards the tail. And I want there's a matte side and a shiny side to this material. This suit is a shiny side out. I actually I didn't have one piece that was big enough to make this, so what I ended up doing was I had to seam together another piece here, and then another smaller one down at the bottom. You can see I have the window open, and I also have this air filter here that has an activated carbon filter, which helps to pull the VOCs from the glue, which is the toluene, the acetone, the MEK, the stuff you don't want to be breathing. Doing it out of a syringe really helps. I don't keep my jar of glue open, so this is very little. Oh, my glove just tore. And I wear the nitrile gloves. Of course, my hand's now sweaty. This helps to keep the acetone and toluene and MEK from getting into my skin and drying it out. I think I'm going to have to leave my hand out for just a second. That's one bad thing about having to change gloves. Your hands get a little bit sweaty from being in there. So I think once I start to add this material, I believe I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. That way, if there's excess, I'll push it down towards the tail. So to do this, I'm going to work against a cylinder, and what did I just do with my pattern? There it is. Now there's two ways I could do this seam. I could do the suit part of the material on top, or I could do this patch part of the material on top. Really kind of either way is fine. I'm trying to think if I'll benefit from it one way versus the other. I don't know. I think I'm going to go with it on top. Mainly because I'm going to start with this seam, and it's actually easier to apply the glue there than to apply it. I can do it like this, or that's not real easy. I could turn the whole thing 180 degrees, or I could work, I guess, on this side would be another option. But I think I'll just start here. I'm going to go ahead and apply a 1/2 inch wide band of glue for the first couple inches and spread it out. And I'm going to I'm going to look ahead to make sure that I'm going to maintain that half inch. If I keep going at this same I guess angle with the patch, because you can move it like this or like this. Now I'll see if I can get another glove on. The humidity here in Alabama does not help. I've got the window open, so it's a little bit humid in this room. The air conditioning is also running, so it's keeping me from being miserably hot. But I want the fresh air and I want the air circulation. If it were cooler outside, I'd just go outside and work. But it's unfortunately like a sauna here. So the jar helps me to kind of line things up, hold things in place. It gives me something to stretch against if I need to stretch one layer or the other. And by layer I mean, like the patch versus the suit. If I need to, if I stretch them kind of both across there, I can kind of make up for some slight differences in length between the two. So basically just going to keep doing this same technique. I can shift my material for whatever makes it easy. I try to keep a paper towel to set my syringe on so that my glue doesn't get everywhere. If you're not careful, you can, when you set it down, the glue can try to tend to keep running. One thing you can do is you can pull the plunger back a little bit to get it to stop. And also there's a trick if you try to get all the air out, which looks like I got a little bubble in there. That may be part of my problem. Having an air bubble allows compression because the air can compress. The glue doesn't really compress. The air compresses in that bubble, and then it's pushing the glue out. So if you can get rid of the air bubbles, it'll actually be less likely to keep running. It's one of those things, do as I say, not as I do. I sometimes get into a hurry and don't always check for air bubbles. And they can form too, like you can get them out in the beginning and then they can kind of form while you're working. You just want to try to avoid it getting glue all over your suit, because then you got a mess to deal with and clean up. You want to try to remind yourself to kind of go back and roll the stuff that you've already glued down every 5 to 10 minutes for the first half hour or so. Good pressure is the key to a good strong bond. And also not having wrinkles. Wrinkles are your enemy. You don't want a wrinkle because you're going to be dealing with trying to figure out where something is leaking later on, and it's going to probably be from the wrinkle. Not that they're impossible to seal, but they're really difficult to seal. So if you can just avoid wrinkles, then that is the key. I always kind of push my needle back up into the seam where I've already glued, or I kind of pull back a little bit to make sure I don't have a gap in my glue, because that's also another spot where it's going to end up leaking, and it's a real problem to find that kind of a leak, because sometimes it'll leak and sometimes it won't. It'll be intermittent, and the reason being is because it's a gap in two overlapping pieces, and if the pressure is just right, then those that gap will kind of seal itself off with pressure. But if you move the material a certain way, it'll start leaking. So it's a real pain to find those kind of leaks. So it's best if you just try to avoid them by checking yourself as you go. I try to keep another piece of paper towel for wiping up any kind of excess glue that comes out. Now here's where I added some material earlier to cover that old inflation valve hole. Doing a little more rolling on it. Right here I've got a lot of little dips and crevices along these seams, so I'm going to put a little bit of extra glue just to make sure that it really gets wetted out. Trying to get a good angle here. I seem to have gotten a little bit of a wrinkle here. More on this back side. Yep, there it is. What I might do right there, and stick my syringe back up under there and kind of wiggle it back and forth, inject a little bit more glue, and that way I can kind of roll that out. I'm going to flip it over and do it from this back side. Kind of stretch it a little bit. It's always good to flip it over and kind of look at your backside, because sometimes you can't see little wrinkles and stuff when you're looking at it from the front. You can also roll it from this side too. You might see some air bubbles and things that you don't see from the front. You can also take this time to add a little more glue if you see some gaps, but I usually will come back after I've done a whole seam and do that in one go. Sometimes I'll switch out with a blue or a red needle depending, so I have a little bit more control and I'm not putting out as much glue. Back from working from the front side, peel it back a little bit. with a nice band of a 1/2 inch or so of glue. Getting there. Guess I'm probably about halfway, coming down towards the tail. You might wonder why I have the blue painter's tape on this glass jar. If you have a glass jar that's clean and doesn't have a label on it, then you don't need that. The problem was this jar, I removed the label and I cleaned it and it was just sticky from the adhesive from the label. So I put the blue painter's tape on there just to cover up the sticky stuff. If you can get a glass jar that doesn't have all that sticky residue after taking the label off, then you don't need it. Just use the glass jar. So I got another bump I'm going across right here. This is where the tail used to be attached. I'll be reattaching the tail later on, but I got a bump to go over first right here, and I'm going to put a little bit of extra glue to make sure that gets sealed. And I'll dig my fingers into that as I go across it. Stretching this because I was getting a little bit of a wrinkle right there. I might still have a little bit of a wrinkle there. Might have to flip it over and look at the back side here in a second. And right here, making sure that I get a good bond on either side of these two bumps. From the factory seam that was there for the tail. I like to try to take care of it now so that this is not a hole that I'm having to deal with later on. So here on the other side, there's a wrinkle. I was kind of figuring that was there. I could kind of feel it. Kind of trying to stretch the material so that excess material kind of stretches its way out. Kind of looking at some of the other stuff that I did a little while ago. Well, I've got it turned over and looking at the back side. So your main objective is to try to get the two pieces of material as flush as possible with each other so they can bond. Because you're basically doing a chemical weld, and it's only going to be as airtight and strong as the two pieces of material are coming together. If you don't put good pressure on it, or if you've got some gaps, then or bubbles even, then you're not going to have the strength. So if you really want a good, strong seam, you've got to make sure that you don't have wrinkles, bubbles, and you put good pressure on the whole thing. So as I roll this, I'm actually putting some pretty good force down on it, especially if it's something I've glued about 10 minutes ago, because if you put too much pressure down on one that you've just freshly done, you can accidentally like scoot it and you end up with a whole bunch of wrinkles. It can slide still. But after about 10 minutes or so, it's not going to really do that as much. So you can kind of put a little more pressure, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes out, you can really put some good pressure down on it and not risk making it slide. And you don't have to roll on a jar. You could go on a flat surface. I just have the jar here. It's something hard to kind of roll against. But the jar is nice when I'm doing my seams to give me something to kind of stretch around. All right, we're getting there. This looks like the last 6 or 7 inches. I'm going to try to be careful not to tear this anymore. Luckily, it stopped right at a seam, so it's not continuing to rip. I'll a lot of times do a little cul-de-sac kind of circle at the end to keep it from tearing, or I'll put a piece of tape on the end, or I've even seen some of my crafters glue a little piece of PVC across it to keep it from traveling. I'll kind of put this up here to try to get the weight off of this. See if I can work it like this. It really makes a big difference on how your material is oriented to how good of work you can do. So I really kind of try to angle it and get it in the right position that makes it easy for me to work on it. That could be the difference of you getting really frustrated and doing really lousy work or doing really nice seams. think this is probably the last bit. So the question is, do I glue this or do I glue up here? I might glue up here because I don't, either that or I could kind of figure out where to stop, and then I might finish the rest kind of from the outside rather than doing it over the jar this way. I guess I could go like I've been doing, but I'm going to stop it where my thumb is. I like to use the side of my hand like that because it's almost like a brayer roller. It's cushy and it kind of forms around the seam and puts good pressure down. Not quite as pinpoint pressure. Alright, let's look at this on the outside. So the end of my seam is there, and then I got a little more material. I'm just going to leave that be until I kind of finish this off. I'll wait till I do the other side and come down here and then figure out what I'm going to do with that piece. You know, if I'll keep gluing it or if I'll cut it. Or my zipper, actually, I should point out, it's actually not going to go all the way down to here. It's going to stop a little bit short of the tail. So I could even reattach the tail, maybe, or at least figure out where the tail's going to go. I could take a circle and figure out where the tail's going to stop, and then I can make my zipper stop just a little bit short of that. Alright, so now let's go to this side. Got half of this done. Now I'm going to do the other half. And I'm going to do the same thing. I want to let this be on top. Since I did it on top on this side, I'll try to be consistent. Alright, make sure I'm sticking this down right. So this is going to come around, close in the neck hole. I want to make sure that I got it angled so that as I continue, it's going to be a 1/2 inch overlap. I don't want it to be skewed this direction, and then as I keep going, it wants to like diverge, or it wants to converge even more. I want to try to make sure it's parallel. pull it back and add more glue. I'm going to move slightly here so that I can work on it this way. Did my roller go? Ah, there it is. Maybe I can get a better camera angle too. I have a claw that I can put my camera on. All right, let's see. I'm gonna clamp my, I got this little thing here I can clamp this phone with. So I'm gonna, oops. Oh, I bet that was awesome. Let's do this. All right, so this is sort of like my perspective looking down. Maybe this will be a little bit better angle. I was kind of hoping to get something that was really close up. All right. little bit closer up shot of this gluing process. I'm going to kind of peel it back just a little bit. Make sure I don't have a gap. And I'm going to try to do a 1/2 inch wide bead of glue that's pretty evenly spread. I'm just pushing against the plunger of the syringe kind of with the base of my palm. And just kind of learn how much pressure to put to get the right amount of glue out. And then I'm going to try to keep that bottom layer tight against the cylinder, and then I just want to kind of lay this down. Now I want to look ahead though, because I want this to keep parallel, so it looks like right here I might have to kind of do a little bit of a stretch to get it to work, because it looks like my shape is changing on this patch. Like I think it's kind of doing like the tip of the diamond, or the little corner of the diamond is kind of right here. So as I'm going down, if I'm not careful, I'm going to start diverging. So I'm going to have to really kind of stretch it a little bit to get things to line up. But stretching it across the cylinder, this glass jar, really helps with that. Now I did a little more of an overlap than I anticipated, so I'm going to have to add a little bit of glue here along the edge. Alright, so I'm going to peel it back a little bit, and then I'm going to keep trying to do a little bit of a course correction by stretching this way slightly. I'm not going to do nearly as long of a run, since I'm trying to kind of do something a little bit trickier here. I can also kind of angle my jar a little bit to help. And that actually is about all I needed. I just kind of angled it. Gives me a slightly different curve to work around. Just as you work, it's kind of good to look ahead to see, are you still parallel? Is it still going to lay down parallel? Now I'm coming up here to this piece where the valve was, and there's a ridge, so I want to make sure I have plenty of glue in this area to get a good bond. Lots of bumps and things I got to work over. So need to make sure this gets wetted out really good. Kind of digging my fingernail in here along these ridges. Another little ridge here. This is where I added 4 inches of extra length to the torso. From here to here is the extra material. Basically had to buy an extra angel dragon to use as extra material. Go back and do a little more rolling on this seam. I'm going to go back and actually roll the other side real good too. The other side meaning the seam I did just a little while ago. That's already finished. So this one right here. You can see bubbles and things move and squish out. Even though this is done like half an hour ago, it's still not set yet. So you got time to keep, applying pressure and working out bubbles and wrinkles and things. Almost done with this piece, getting close to the tail here. Then I'll be able to put the zipper on and climb into this thing and try it out. Of course, I won't be able to inflate it, but I can at least get into it and make sure it fits. Now, actually, you can inflate it just to kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like by hooking in a, like a vacuum or something that can put out a lot of air. I have one of these Metro Air inflators, and it puts out a lot of air. I can stick that tube down in there. I can climb into it and kind of seal it off with tape around my neck. Since this one has no head, this is a suit that the head is removable. I could basically zip it up and just inflate it to kind of see what sort of shape it takes. Since I've added all this material and I kind of want to make sure that it doesn't look ridiculous. In the past, I added in material, and then once I finally got done, I inflated it and made it look like it was wearing a backpack and had a big hunchback. So it's kind of nice to check it out after you've only done the outer layer, or even if it's the inner layer you're working on, you can still, whichever one you're doing, whichever one you finish first, you can climb in and inflate it, or just inflate it by itself without somebody in it. But you can kind of kill two birds with one stone if you do it while you're in it. You can check to make sure it fits, plus see how it's going to look inflated. So I'll probably do that here in a little bit once I get this finished. See if I need to make any alterations. If I was making the suit for someone else and they weren't here to try it on, what I would do is I would inflate it and take measurements at the waist and the chest, the underbust, the shoulders, and I would make sure that it's bigger than the person, because if it's inflatable, it needs to be at least the person size, preferably larger though, because it's inflatable, so it's not supposed to be skin tight. Of course, you could have some areas that are closer to skin tight if you wanted to make the waist look skinnier. You could make that part come in and almost be skin tight, but then maybe the chest and the butt, maybe other areas are really exaggerated and much larger. You see a lot of latex cat suits that have inflatable portions, especially the thighs, and things like that will be inflatable to give it a different look, to make it look like the person's got animal legs or something like that. But other parts of it are skin tight and not inflatable. So you can kind of work with the inflation and how big it is in certain areas to really change the way it looks. More how you're morphing the human figure into a very different figure. I try to do my best to cut down on glue residue. I do get a little bit, but I'll come back and clean that up with some acetone and Q-tips. Now it looks like I'm going to have a problem here. I'm going to start diverging if I don't do a little bit of a correction. So let's see, I want to go this way. I'm going to probably turn it this way and kind of work my way. I'm going to peel it back a little bit. Looks like I got a little bit of a extra flap of material here. I'm going to cut that off so I can get a better seal. Last stretch here. Man, I can't believe I still have 2 viewers watching me live. You guys are diehard. Hopefully going live like this is beneficial. I'm hoping I can kind of share some of my techniques and what makes sense. For me, of course, for somebody else it will probably be different. All right, I am running into a bit of a weird problem here. This is good to see that you can run into this kind of thing. So the problem that I'm running into is that I have got extra material. You see this? So if I come down, there is actually going to be some extra material. So there's a couple of different ways to handle this. Really, at this point, it's probably going to be best if I just maintain my 1/2 inch and basically finish it off like this. And then what I need to do is once I go to, I'm going to be cutting a slit down the middle for the zipper, and I'm going to start probably down at this end, and I'm going to clip off this excess. And I might do it a little bit conservatively at first, and that's going to basically take up that slack. That looks like that was probably because the pattern I made, might have shifted or slipped inside when I was drawing it out, so it might have ended up a little bit longer than it really need to be. And that's okay. It's important to see that, like, when you do this kind of work, that you'll run into problems. You'll make mistakes. It's really just about it's an art, and it's more about what do you do to problem solve as you run across some of these weird things. Having tools to deal with the issues that you run into like this. So what you're going to see here is how I deal with this, and there's probably some other ways that you can deal with it. The important thing is to not freak out. Just, think about what you can do. And at this point, I've already got everything down, so I can't really do anything drastic. It's, looking like the best approach is just to keep on going with what I was doing. And so that's what I'm going to do. Go ahead and finish off my 1/2 inch overlap. And then what I'm going to do is get rid of this extra material down at the bottom by cutting it, by folding it, because it already kind of is folding itself. And I need a zipper to be in the middle anyways. If I didn't need a zipper, what I could do is, if I ended up with that, I could cut it and then put a strip over it, and probably do the strip on the front and the back to sandwich it and seal it. But luckily, I don't need to worry so much about that. And what I can do is pull this jar out and fold this so that I kind of get the midpoint, which is where the zipper is going to end up going. So if I touch this side to this side and I kind of fold it, I basically can kind of figure out where I need to cut. So the first thing I'll do is kind of at least do that. I'm going to also kind of cut some of this extra material off just a little bit. Now, if I wanted to, I could continue this approach of like folding it, but I think to continue my cut, I'm going to lay it flat and then basically just measure and do a straight line. So for here though, so I've got this extra material that I want it to come down to a point, because you've got this extra stuff. And so what I want to do is basically something like that. That might not be exactly what I want to make. I may kind of trim that up here in a little bit, but I think what I want to do first is lay this out. At least that kind of gets me started. And it may or may not be quite in the right direction. It kind of looks like it's veering a little bit to that side, but that's okay. I'll probably cut a little bit this way to kind of even it out, and then work it straight. And it's not really going to work itself out probably until I get up to about here. You can kind of see it's still got like it's trying to kind of poke upwards. And what we're looking to do is kind of get a piece that sort of lays flat right here, which is going to be a little bit more probably straight like that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is move a bunch of stuff out of the way and make my zipper line, and then I'll come back to this to kind of clean it up. I think I'm going to try just using tape. You could mark it on the material, here we've got about 6 3/4. So if we had 6, we'd have the midpoint would be 3 inches, and 3/4 is going to be just a little bit under half. So what I'm going to do is make a mark. There. And then as I come down, got another piece of tape. I think I'm going to come from the bottom of the wing, maybe kind of on the side of the wing. Actually, it might be a little more. And we're going to measure from that seam to there. That's 9 1/2. So 4. And 3/4. You know, if I do tape, the only thing I risk is I got to make sure that I don't have folds in the material. So I could switch over to gel pens, but I think I'll stick with this for now. I wish I hadn't just put Sharpie on my suit right here. All right, come down a little more, and here to here, we've got 11, so I'll do 5 1/2. Trying to find what I just did with my tape. I feel it, there it is. Stuck between layers. Just a little bit more, it's a little more than 11. All right, keep on coming down. I'm gonna pick a point here where I've got the same seam that goes across. And 12 inches. So I could actually kind of start connecting these dots. Like a little wrinkle under there. Ten and a half. Five and a quarter. Now, actually, I told you wrong. I just realized the zipper doesn't go all the way down here because the tail goes there. So actually, what I was talking about a minute ago, where if you didn't have a zipper, you would do a cut like this and then you would do a patch inside and outside. That's actually what we're going to end up doing, because the tail is going to stop short of the zipper. And actually, I have a bowl that is this exact size of the tail. So I'm going to go grab that real quick. Well, I can't seem to find the bowl, but I have a plate that's the right size. I have a circle tool, but it doesn't get quite this big. So this is the base of the tail right here. And so this plate is actually a perfect size that I could kind of use as a template. So what I want to do is kind of figure out if I'm going to put the tail starting where the old tail was, which is here. So you can see there's the old tail's mark. And then I am going to stop short of the tail with the zipper, so I want to kind of make a little mark. Actually, I could just use that top there of the tape. I don't want to stop there. But what I could do here is go ahead and take a measurement. So 6.5. So I'm going to put 3 right there. And finish this off. Alright, so now we're ready to cut. I'll probably do this with scissors rather than the rolling cutter because I don't have a real big cutting mat that I can, or really a cutting mat that's skinny enough that I can get through this neck hole to have inside there as a backing. So I don't want to cut through the front, so I'll just use scissors instead. Every time I build one of these suits, I almost do it a different way. I'm more of kind of a, I have the big idea of what I want to do in my head, and I just kind of work through different, whatever comes to mind as far as a technique to achieve that. So, and I sometimes try different things. So sometimes you'll see me building one of these suits and I do it a different way, and I don't know, it's kind of, to me, it's almost kind of interesting to try different things to see what works better. And then from that point on, I can use what I've learned works, more efficiently. I'm getting this off as quickly as possible because I don't want it to leave sticky residue. And I'm looking to see if I need to clean up anything, and I do see a little bit of Sharpie right here that somehow got on there. Uh-oh, that's been on there for a minute. So I'll probably take some acetone. I'll use the syringe. Might be a little easier. Okay. I am going to go get a zipper. I think that I'm going to swap these sliders out because they're kind of garbage. So I'm going to cut this end. And I got some double pole sliders that I buy, so you can have a slider inside and outside the suit. And I want to put these things so that let's see, I want to make it so that I can have one at either end. You got to orient these things the right way. There's a taller side, and that has to go on the teeth. Starting these is always kind of tricky because you may or may not start it in exactly the same spot, and then your zipper's kind of skewed. So let's see how that works out. I don't know if that's right or not. A little bit off. This side's... Let's try that again. Come back down here. Still not quite. You see, when I cut it, it was straight. I just need to try to get it started straight. That looks good. Yeah, awesome. All right, now this one will run backwards. To get it on, I have to kind of put it in and then pull these apart one click to get it started. I could add a third one or fourth one, however many I want to do. But I basically want to go ahead. Now, one thing I can do to keep this from coming off is put some tape around it. Or I could even kind of go around each side. Whatever makes sense. You don't want to keep having to put those ends on. They're not easy to get on. All right, time to glue the zipper on. We're going to start down here on this end and then work our way to the top. And the reason why I want to do that is I like this nice metal stop that's already on there. And I can let that be right here at the bottom. So go ahead and make sure I got everything I need. I need my jar. I need my glue and my roller. And I'm about out of glue, so I'm going to go ahead and take this time to refill this. We should have a jar of glue. Wipe the excess off there. Kind of hard to work with the zipper being in your way, so I am going to actually start this without the zipper there. And anchor the end, and I don't want to put glue too close to the track of where the zipper is going to slide. I want to leave about 1/8 of an inch or so, just have a little bit of clearance. And I want the little stop to be just at the bottom there. And I don't want to bring the vinyl too close to where the zipper is going to be, because this stuff is a little bit thicker, and the zipper will have a hard time trying to slide on top of that. So I want to kind of maintain this, you know, 1/8 to 1/4 inch or so. Now the trick is I'm sliding this back down because I want to make sure that when I do this other part that I'm gluing it in the right place so that it's not skewed. Which is really easy to do. You can get it off and it actually, what's going to be a bit of a problem here, I might need to redo this just a bit. I might have to bring, hold on, let's do this. I might have to bring these a little more center. It's almost like you don't really want to come to a point there. These things, you actually almost want to have like, let's do this. Let's bring these guys so they have just a little bit of a gap. So I'm kind of flaring them just a little bit. And so now I have, instead of a point, I kind of have something a little easier to work with to get my gap that I want. So that's more of what I'm looking for right there. So my zipper can get down. Looks like I'm still a little bit close. My zipper kind of pushed this material kind of out of the way a little bit here, which I could kind of trim that a little bit. You know, I could cut that back. Let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and give myself some glue. Keep about 1/4 inch of clearance from the where the actual zipper track is in the center. And then I'm gonna, knowing, you know, that I've started these evenly, I can kind of move the zipper out of the way and then just work on gluing this and maintaining my distance that I'm looking for of about 1/4 of an inch. So this one's not an airtight bond, but I still try to make sure that I don't have gaps. This is all structural. The air from the sealed chamber will not come close to this actual zipper. The 2 layers will actually bond just about 1/2 inch away from the zipper. So this is not an airtight seal that I'm making. But you can basically follow all the same principles of putting good pressure because we want it to be strong. You want to try not to stretch the material because you could end up with skewed results by the time you get to the top. You want to make sure that things are coming together evenly as you zip it up. You can kind of check that, like as you're going up, you can look for, you know, where if you have a seam kind of going across, you can make sure that you're not skew. In fact, I could kind of zip this back down if I wanted to. Whatever makes sense. I just try to keep it out of the way, really. Having it shut is actually kind of nice. You can try to maintain the gap so that it looks nice. It's more for kind of an aesthetics thing. So once I finish the zipper, I'll be able to put this single layer suit on and check my measurements before I go to making all the same modifications to the inner layer. So we're by no means near being finished with this thing. There's still a ton of work that has to be done. All the seams, all the factory seams, I should say, have to be reinforced, because they will. I have learned from the very first suit I made, I didn't reinforce them, and over time I've had to basically patch every single factory seam. These seams that I made, the overlaps, don't need to be reinforced because they're pretty strong. I'm amazed that there are still 2 people watching. Well, at least it makes me feel better about going live and doing this. Thanks for being interested. If you have any suggestions on camera angle or lighting or anything, let me know. I'm hoping that this kind of works. It's a tough thing. Sometimes I want to be close enough so you can see detail, but I do have to keep kind of making sure that I'm not off the screen. Hopefully the lighting is good enough to see. So I just keep alternating, doing one side then the other, and I'm doing about a 3 to 4 inch stretch at a time. There's not a huge overlap here. This is more like about a 3/8 overlaps. So I try to make sure that I have plenty of glue. I want to make sure it gets wetted out and gets a good bond. It's not quite the 1/2 inch that I like, but that's really kind of all we have to work with on this. So the zipper is from Amazon. If you search for waterproof zipper, it's not a watertight zipper, but it's backed with vinyl on one side, and it makes it amazing for doing this because I can just bond directly to that vinyl only on one side. It's actually fabric on the opposite side, and you can have varying success bonding to the fabric. In my experience, it always ends up pulling away from the fabric after a few months. You basically, to glue to the fabric side, you have to just put glue down first and let it kind of dry on the fabric, and then you have something to glue to. Excuse me while I have some coffee. I'm feeling pretty good about it. There's a fold in the material, and you can see it lines up coming across, so that at least that's lining up. It's one thing you got to kind of worry about with having too much material on one side, and then you end up with excess material when you get to the end of your zipper. And that can happen by accidentally stretching it, or if you kind of waver a little bit. Looks like my phone, I don't have my phone plugged in. It looks like my phone battery is about dead. So if it cuts off, I'm sorry. I'm getting pretty close to being done. And the next step is actually going to be to try this on. And I'll probably go live in a separate video for that. So if we don't make it quite to the end, it's not too far. I'm just going to keep doing the same thing until I get there. And then I'll go back and roll it real good, make sure everything's rolled out. If you ever do real thin material, almost like beach ball thin, you can glue the zipper down without cutting a slit first. You can literally just put glue on the zipper and just smack it down on the vinyl, let it dry, and then take an X-Acto knife and cut the material, because it's thin enough that the zipper slider can slide right over it. This stuff is thicker, and the zipper little slider can't slide over the material. It gets caught. So you got to kind of cut it and move it out of the way. I have had people want to hide the zipper, and if you're doing a material that's easy to find color, like white, you can use beach ball material that's white and actually put that over the track and then glue it to the suit, and then you can cut a slit, and then basically you've put a white cover over the zipper. I did that on a reindeer suit where we had the zipper on the belly and put some white beach ball material. So here's a cool place. We have a seam coming across, and it's a little bit off, just a little bit, so you can kind of see it doesn't always come together perfectly, but of course I could stretch this side a little bit to try to kind of make up for it here. In fact, I could pull it back and even do that right now, so that for aesthetics that the seam kind of lines up. So I'll glue this side down. Yeah, getting glue on my hands. I really should put some gloves on. Just a little bit more glue on this side. And I kind of stretched it a little bit so that now my seam lines up going across. almost finished with the zipper. Not the suit. Probably a couple more weeks worth of work on this thing, because I only work on it really on the weekends, sometimes at night. Prefer to work on it when I have long stretches of time, so I can just knock out big chunks of it. And I got a little bit of glue coming getting onto the track where you can see it, but I'll come back with a Q-tip and some acetone and clean that up a little later. If you peel it up like I just did while the glue is pretty fresh, you can put it back down and it'll bond pretty strong. You can also kind of reactivate it by squirting just a little bit of acetone on it, and it'll kind of reliquefy and reactivate the glue. As I get closer to the end, I want to kind of make sure that things are going to line up as they come together. So it's still a little bit far away to check that, but as I get closer to it, I want to start checking. That way, if I need to stretch one side just a little bit, I can, so they come together and line up. All right, let's check and see how we're coming together here. Keep going. Then, hey, that's pretty good. In good shape. It's gonna line up pretty good. I don't have to do any. And I think that's because, you know, I checked myself as I was going at different spots where I had like a seam going across, and I could kind of stretch to realign as I was going, so that way when I got to the end here, I don't have a whole lot of excess on one side. So once I get done, I'm going to pull my slider down and I'm going to cut the track, and then I'm going to put some stops, basically wrap little pieces of vinyl across the end so that the zipper can't come off.